Hi, everybody. AlBernstein here with another edition of our Big Time Boxing Show here on the Salida Promotions YouTube channel. And this show is a special one to me because our guest is the great Jimmy Lennon Jr., someone that I have known for many, many years. He is, of course, one of the most iconic ring announcers in the history of the sport of boxing. And, in addition, happens to be one of the nicest men ever to be involved in the sport of boxing. He is someone who began his career in the shadows of his father, the great Jimmy Lennon Sr., who announced boxing on the West Coast in various venues. And Jimmy started to do some fights at the Forum in Los Angeles at the behest of his father, who wanted him to get involved in it, even though Jimmy was at that time a full-time educator, was the headmaster of a school in Los Angeles. And he just saw that as a kind of a sidelight, but that led him to this great career that has included now 42 years of announcing boxing on many, many major networks, including all the time I worked with him at Showtime. And now Jimmy continues to announce on platforms all around the world, working for many different promoters and platforms, and has truly become one of the most important voices of boxing as a ring announcer that we've seen in probably the entire history of the sport. So here is my conversation with Jimmy Lennon Jr. So Jimmy, I appreciate you joining us on this show. This is one of a number of times that I've been fortunate enough to interview you and talk about not only the art of ring announcing, but also your storied history in the sport. And it's always a joy to get to share a microphone with you.
Thank you, Al. It's great to be with you. I have always appreciated talking with you, whether on camera or off, as we share a lot of information about TV shows and movies we like and don't like, as well as the sport of boxing. But great to be with you.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, we've spent all the many dinners and times we've spent off camera. If we had only taped those, we'd have a lot of content, as they say. Uh, although
For
some
sure.
might not be interesting to the masses at large. But you are, of course, remain a central part of the boxing landscape as one of the most, if not the most, active and well-known ring announcers in the sport. You, of course, started out the sport on a part-time basis when you were doing the boxing at the Forum while you were still doing your day job as an educator in California. And at that moment, could you have ever foreseen that now, these many years later, we'd be talking and you would be firmly implanted as a Hall of Famer in the firmament of boxing?
No, I didn't envision that at all, Al. You are exactly right. I just needed some money on the side. And, I got into it because my dad paid me $20 to go with him to interview the fighters. And I said, yeah, okay. And then somehow, and I don't know how, because I'm, generally a shy, private person, he got me to get into the ring and start to work a little bit. And I made a little more money. And I just had no vision that I'd be doing it for now, believe it or not, 42 years.
Wow.
And enjoying it so much. And, yeah, I think back and I never would have envisioned that, but I'm so happy and proud. And just blessed that it did happen that way. It's a sport I love. And the events surrounding the sports, getting to know you, have dinner with you, getting, some nice camaraderie, just it's in travel, and it just has become a wonderful life. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, pretty extraordinary. And of course, you alluded to your dad, Jimmy Lennon Sr., who was one of the great ring announcers of all time and ushered you into the sport. So over these years, you have developed, I think, a very fan-friendly style. As the way I like to think of it, as a host of the evening. It suits that kind of, to me, that kind of description of you. Has the art of ring announcing for you changed at all, or because of the nature of what you do, is there not much room for change?
Well, in terms of me and what I do, I always, I really just watched my dad a lot growing up. So it was just kind of natural. Fortunately, I sound like him, I have a similar look to
Hmm.
him. And I don't know if I ever copied him, but it was more natural.
Yeah.
And through the years, yeah, I think I've tried to, I just always try to improve, Al. I'm always trying to, get a little better, try to refine my skills. I think I've worked on trying to be a little more exciting. And yeah, I'm the host of the event, and it's not about me, in my opinion. It's about the fighters in the
Right.
event. But I try to build it up. I think if there's kind of a crescendo that I try to work
Yeah.
on. So that's changed for me. Of course, I didn't always say it's showtime, and so
Right.
that was something that I knew, less than halfway through my career. So that was new, and I think it was inspired by Michael Buffer with the "Let's Get Ready to Rumble" became such an important tagline, and I felt like it really fit for me to use that tagline. But at the same time, I didn't change. I don't plan to change too much because I do think I want to put the spotlight on the fighters, not on
Right.
myself. I want to honor them and the event. And so that's what's most important to me.
You and I have always shared that philosophy that in the respective arts of what we do related to the fight, that at the end of the day, it's much more important to put the focus on the fighters, not necessarily on ourselves. Though it is important that we project the right personality and project the right tenor for the event so that people will enjoy it. And in your case, accuracy is the most important part. And it's so funny, people think that because ring announcers only have so many things to say that it's impossible to have a slip up or have an inaccurate moment. But even the best in the sport sometimes do.
Yeah, and there are so many distractions in the ring while you're doing this
Right.
as well. The fighters yelling at each other, or the corners yelling at each other while you're announcing. You've got your promoters Don King, whispering in your ear to do something or change something, and you've got all of this with all, and the timekeeper not paying attention. And you got a camera so close to you, it's right up your nose hairs, and you got to just do it perfectly and ignore all the distractions. So I understand when people make mistakes, and that I dread at making any kind of mistake. I'm not a perfect man.
No, we none of us are for sure. And the interesting thing about that is that we're also you alluded to the fact that we're talking about larger than life personalities around you in a moment of great importance. That moment leading up to that fight for everyone in that ring has super duper importance for how their life is going to move on the following day.
Oh, you're so right. You think of the referee, okay, other than the fighters, of course, and the people behind the cameras as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, important moment. It's an exciting moment. It's just one of the best moments of my life when I can introduce the fighters, finish it off, and step down and sit ringside and watch it unfold. Because that's just it's a great sport, and that's the moment of the sport that I love the most.
I've covered, boxing with a lot of many other sports as well, and I've covered boxing with people from Sports Center and other places who do a lot of other sports as well, and they all kind of tend to agree that that moment before the time just before a major fight, one of the biggies, the Pacquiao Mayweather's, the Tyson, Lewis's fights, we could name 30 different ones, um, that those moments are the most exciting that they feel in the world of sports. That's kind of a fair assessment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it really is. I took a friend to a Tyson fight once, and I can't remember what fight it was, but it lasted only a couple of rounds. But the crowd never sat down. I mean, there is such an electricity of waiting for that first bell to take place. And he said to me afterwards, he says, I've been to all the big sporting events.
Yeah.
You name it, Super Bowl, World Series. He says, there's nothing like this experience. It's so it is, being there is just so special. And we have got to enjoy that so many times.
How do you, of course, have been around many um, many well-known people in the sport of boxing, but you've been around also many celebrities from outside boxing that gravitate to the sport, as have I, and it's always an interesting part of the sport. How do you, Jimmy Lennon, get how do you feel they kind of approach you? They watch you and you're iconic, and they're in their living room seeing you or at the fights. Uh, how how interesting is it to interact with some of those celebrities who are different in a different path of life, and how they interact with you?
Well, honestly, Al, I'm always surprised. Like, you know who I am? Honestly,
Yeah,
almost like, wow. I mean, I am a huge fan of yours, and you know who I am. So I'm always surprised, and it's just honored. And it takes a while to get past that kind of the kind of feelings of wow, this is really special. But I love it. I love it when people kind of recognize me. I wouldn't say I have any close friends that are famous
hmm,
celebrities. Those are the moments that we meet, and that's great. But I got to say this honestly, and I'm not going to mention any names. There are some celebrities that to meet that have kind of changed my mind. Like, ooh,
right.
no eye contact, and like, ooh, I didn't like that meeting very much. So that happens too. So there's a
It
little bit
does.
of both
Yeah,
in my
that
world.
can it can go both ways, where you're surprised one way or the other. And of course, they have this moment of Jimmy Lennon frozen in their minds, and that's why really I asked the question, because it's fascinating. These people that do these big things. When they look at you and they see that moment, it's iconic, and it's kind of something that I think lives with them in a unique way. Um, you mentioned before that Michael Buffer, who is, of course, along with you, the most iconic of all ring announcers, and you alluded to the fact that you guys have a slightly different style of doing it, which I think is fascinating. And of course, I've known Michael for many years, and for many, many years did the Top Rank Boxing series with him. And you even mentioned the tagline thing. I'm kind of a little bit like you in that I'm not a tagline type of person, right? It doesn't like I've 45 years I've been broadcasting, and I have never somehow gotten a tagline. You did it because it was Showtime, and that they wanted to have that, and you wanted to have it. But it is interesting. I've said this all the time in broadcasting, that there are things about other broadcasters that I see that I like the nature of it, and sometimes I'll incorporate a little bit. And you alluded to the fact that here's Michael, in theory, a rival, although it's not really a rivalry. And yet there's a little part of his thing that you said, okay, maybe I'll when I do my tagline, I'll look at how he does his.
Yeah, I think you and I are in such agreement there. I think some, and I'll look at ring announcers, young new ones. They have to have a tagline to start, and I just don't
Yeah,
think that's how it works. In fact, I was very resistant to any kind of
yeah,
tagline because I thought, like you're so well known, you don't need a tagline, and so I'm thinking, no, I don't need it, and I don't want it. But Showtime
yeah,
became so natural. I said,
yeah.
okay, let's give it a shot. And but I think a lot of it's not about the tagline. It just is not. Um, and so a lot of young ring announcers, I think, make the mistake of making a tagline, and it kind of doesn't go across often very well. So I'll not say everyone, but it's often just seems awkward.
That's a very interesting point, and I think you're right about that. And of course that's indicative of some of the times we live in now. It's a different world in which everybody's looking for that viral moment, that kind of moment when
Mhm.
everything gets codified into a little square, and that can be the what defines you. And who there are, again, we're not going to mention names, referees even created taglines, and that one I thought was intriguing because they're clearly not someone that I would associate a tagline with, but it's intriguing. Everybody has their way of kind of defining things. You've done, of course, the greatest moments in this sport, And one moment that I always find interesting, we've done interviews before, and you've told a lot of these stories, and but to me, one of the most amazing things that you've done is when you announced the Chavez Haugen fight in front of the largest crowd. I guess, is it still the largest crowd that's ever seen a boxing match?
I believe it is, although I think they qualify it because as a paid audience as opposed to a
Oh, I
free,
see. Yeah.
suit. But I believe
But
it
in terms
still
of number
stands
of
as the
people that
largest ever.
watched it, it's probably still the biggest, right?
Yeah, 135,000. Although if you go to Mexico, it's maybe closer to 100. The Mexicans, my friends, will say it's closer to 140,000, but I think it's closer to 135,000.
That was
They're,
amazing.
so-
And that
they're
evening, oh,
yeah,
go ahead. I'm
they
sorry.
are so proud of that moment when I tell people, or I talk to them, yes, I did that fight, and they could say, oh yes, that was September 13th, 1984. They know exactly the date. It's a part of Mexican history. It was such a huge event, that it's ingrained in them. So I believe they just celebrated. What would that be? I don't know, 1980. No, no. So what would that be? The 40th anniversary of that? 30,
Yeah,
35?
close to, right.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm bad
It's
with
in-
dates, but a
it's
long time.
interesting. And didn't they have like a moat around the ring or something, or some like barrier to make sure that whatever happened, they couldn't have the masses coming to ringside?
Yeah, and I remember going to the rehearsal stepping across, and during the event as well. There was a moat, and inside the moat were guards with weapons and German shepherds, that would separate the stands from the ground. And yeah, that it was yeah, it's just an amazing event to stand in the center of the ring and just look up and see the lights from people had. And I swear I remember seeing like little fires, not danger, but like cooking. Because they were there since noon. And so they had to eat, and it was just amazing standing with Don King in the ring and watching, his reaction as we waited, especially the main event with Chavez entering the ring. Amazing.
Yeah, knowing him, he had to get quite a kick out of that. I think those guards and everything were there mostly because they were worried that people would charge the ring just to have a chance to meet you and get to talk with you. I think that was the key
Because
thing.
it is about me, and that's why there were so many people there, of course.
What about me, Al Franken, right? The Al Franken decade. They could have actually made it even better if they had put crocodiles in the moat. That would have really been,
Ooh, ooh.
added a whole nother intrigue to it. Of course, now upcoming, you remain, of course, one of the most sought after ring announcers, and have worked with so many different promoters. And before I get to your next fight, which we'll close things out with, what this I'm hitting you with this out of the blue, and so I don't expect an actual number, but an estimate. About how many different promoters and or TV platforms have hired you to do boxing over all these years? Because one of the things about you is, more so even than almost any other ring announcer, you have worked for more internationally, more people than anybody, I think.
I've had it. Thank you, Al. And sometimes you come up with tough questions. I remember you asked me how many tuxedos do I have. I'm going to have to
Yeah,
count because
that's
I
right.
don't
Yeah.
know. And
This
this
could
is
be an
another.
estimate. It's okay.
This is another tough question. But yeah, I started to make a list of how many foreign countries
Oh,
I've,
interesting.
and I think it's like 36, 37, somewhere around there. And with all the different promoters and broadcasters there, some with Showtime, but some with local ones.
Sure.
For a while I worked in Mexico, and I counted how many states, and I mean I've almost been to every state in Mexico,
Yeah.
for that. And so, yeah, in different continents. So, my guess, I don't know how many, but I would guess maybe 30 or so, 30, 40.
Yeah, I wouldn't even be surprised if that number. One time I made that when I was writing my book, I sat down to make a list of all the announcers I've announced at the ringside, and it was a pretty big list. And I said to myself, I know when I'm done making this and I print the book, I'm going to have not left someone out. Sure enough, I did leave a couple out. So I'm sure in your mind there's going to be more, but it's a very a very big number. Now you are next. I don't know if this is the next fight you have, but it's one of the next ones that fans will take note of. Is in New York, Brooklyn, I believe, with the Gervonta Davis Lamont Roach fight, and that brings me to the question of. Uh, some fighters create excitement with them as a live event. Gervonta Davis is one of those people, isn't he? That has now built a reputation. Number one, he draws very big crowds, and number two, it's kind of an interesting live event when he fights.
I agree with you. There's an electricity when he is fighting, and it surprised me at first. Like, wow, okay, he's has more fans than I thought. And then now I'm expecting it because in Brooklyn it's going to be sold out.
Yeah,
There are going to be fans that are going to be so vocal and excited to see him fight. He's one of the few fighters that people want to pay to see fight. Not necessarily doesn't depend too much about his opponent. He is
very good
just
point. Yeah,
such a talented fighter. He's so strong. He's dynamic, not dull, and boy, does he know how to finish a fight.
yeah.
And so, I think he's a great fighter. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch. So count me as one of the excited fans in the arena. But
Yeah,
now
you.
I've got to tell you, just my next fight's actually in Tokyo. And
Oh wow.
speaking of our international, my international experiences, you know, I've been going to Japan very regularly,
Mm-hmm.
6, 7 times last year. And I got to tell you, if you were to ask me where's the next group of talented boxers, it's,
Yes.
say, Japan. They have such great young fighters, and also some. I just have been told that the gyms are filling up. I think Inoue has had an effect on these
Oh yeah.
young guys, and he's such a great fighter. And Junto Nakatani is who I'm announcing next
Tremendous.
in Japan, and he's a great undefeated fighter. A bantamweight right now, could move up some more. And there's a fighter named Tenshin Nasukawa. Look out for him. He's only had 5 fights, and he's fighting Jason Maloney next with
Wow.
30 fights. And
That's
but
amazing.
he's had a storied kickboxing career, so he's not new in the fight business. But great event coming up.
Yeah, that is great that you're going to be over there. And you are right. Already so many champions in a number of weight divisions from Japan, and many of the top contenders are there. And you have been going there for a long time. And people have the impression that Japanese fans are so polite that they don't create a good atmosphere for fights. Is that a misnomer?
It is changing a little bit. They are quiet and they applaud, and it's nothing like a fight in
No.
in Brooklyn or New York or
They're very
in Los.
appreciative though of the art of boxing.
Absolutely appreciative and very enthusiastic, but there's becoming more of it. They're
Um,
definitely come up. And it's kind of fun when you're in Japan because it's quiet during the fight, but then you can hear individual people just yell out the name of the fighter, and it's kind of fun in some ways. I'm getting used to it. It took me a while because as I'm announcing, there's not as much of a reaction, but it's changing and it's developing, and I love the atmosphere. I think it's unique, and still very exciting.
you can hear individual commentary, right? There's a bunch of would-be AlBernsteins out there they're doing commentary for you, so you don't have to worry. You can hear commentary during the fights from the fans because it's quiet enough.
No problem. As long as you can understand Japanese, you're in the know.
Right. You have to be able to understand it. That's for sure. Jimmy, what a delight to visit with you. Much appreciated for you to take the time to sit and chat with us. Your storied career has been amazing, and you and I have paralleled each other in boxing. You've been doing it for 42 years. I'm beginning my 45th year as a broadcaster, so I just snuck in there a couple of years before you, and I think my final thing to you, because it's kind of where my brain is at these days. Even though we've been doing this for a long time, there is, I think we can safely say that neither of us have lost our interest or passion in it. And I think part of that is because these new circumstances at every turn that you find yourself in create interest within you to participate.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, yeah, I want to keep doing this as long as I can. And I want to thank you for not asking me if I'm planning to retire because it's not in my mind at all, as it isn't in
No,
your mind as well. So I
enjoy doing it.
appreciate, yeah, I appreciate being with you. Thank you for having me. You're a good friend and just someone I'm so proud to know. Thank you.
Well, it's great, Jimmy. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jimmy Lennon Jr. It's always a pleasure to visit with him. And I thought some of the insights he had into the art of ring announcing and how he has seen the boxing world kind of evolve in all these many years was fascinating. Well, we have many, many fascinating guests upcoming for you on this show. We're going to be talking to Frank Warren, the great promoter for Queensberry Boxing, who has had, like Jimmy, a long and storied career as a great promoter. We're also going to be talking in the next couple of weeks with Tom Schreiber, who is like Jimmy Lennon Jr., a ring announcer, and is heading the guard of the current group of ring announcers that we see in the sport. Also, Randy Couture, the legendary MMA fighter, will be with us as well down the road here. And we've got a lot more big names scheduled for you. So please keep checking in with us. And on the Salida YouTube Promotions channel, which is the home of this show, go to it, check out all of our shows from the past, and also see some of the great fights that he has put on his channel. This channel is a labor of love for Dimitri Salida, the man that heads Salida Promotions, and he created it so that you could see famous fights, not so famous, but fun fights, and enjoy the sport of boxing as it has been practiced by so many great fighters. So come to us on the Salida Promotions channel and check out all my shows, and also take a look at some of the really fun fights that they have for you on the channel. All right, take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.